How about this young Indiana Pacers team? They get it done again. They take down the defending champions again for the second time this season. Pacers beat the Warriors this time at home in Cambridge. They survive a Steph onslaught of points. We'll talk about the game, how the Pacers got it done. We'll talk about the resiliency of this team, their ability to bounce back, and how they do it so often and so easily. And we'll talk about the start of trade season. It's December 15th. It's the unofficial opening of trade season. I have some general thoughts I think you all should know about the Pacers heading into this year's deadline, which is still in months. We'll get to all that today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, so much interesting, exciting stuff to get to. First and foremost, Pacers-Warriors. Fun game for the Pacers. They survive and defeat the champs for the second time this season. Pacers sweep Golden State this year. Impressive win. They survive a Steph onslaught. They survive a miserable third quarter to get it done. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk about this team's resiliency. I talk about it a lot, but tonight I actually asked some guys about it, and we saw it in action again. It feels like a good time to talk about it, and two players manifested it perfectly. And at the end, third segment, it's December 15th, the unofficial start of NBA trade season. Let's get some general trade thoughts for the Pacers this season on the board, just so you guys can be prepped for the coming month and a half or so of trade chatter in the NBA. But we'll start with, of course, Pacers-Warriors, the big story from this team, beating the champs again. Again, impressive stuff from the Pacers. 125-119, the final score in this game. And what a game from the Pacers, right? Sweeping the champs is no joke. Pacers found a way to do just that. And everybody who played their role and played it well. And I think that is when the Pacers are at their best. I've said that a lot about them in terms of specific games that everybody played their role and played it well. But, when their bench is good and everybody who's in, puts up about the stats you expect or is a big plus minus for some reason or another, it really shines through. And there was scarcely a lineup in for this team outside of a few moments fleeting in the third quarter, but that was just the starting five where you thought, wow, the Pacers guys out there don't have it or they don't fit right now or something's going wrong. Everybody who played their role and played it well. A classic 2022-23 Pacers game. And I knew this one would be interesting right away, right? Can this team bounce back like they have all the time? The champs are in your building. You're always up for that. Steph Curry is playing on a back-to-back, right? And I also knew it would be a weird, interesting game when the Pacers were winning after the first quarter. Yes, I have to say it again. The Pacers were winning an NBA basketball game in 2022-23 after the first quarter. The fifth time this season they've been winning after the first quarter. It's crazy after 29 games to think about that, but they got it done by 1 point. It's still more than they ever have before, 28-27 after one. From that point on, I thought, all right, this one's going to be interesting for this team. Excuse me, it was 27-26. My apologies for that one. And it was tight. It looked close, but the Pacers were ahead. It was clear they had a blueprint that would work. And that shined in the second quarter. Absolutely dominant second quarter from the Indiana Pacers in this game. One of their best, if not their number one best offensive quarter of the season. 47 points in that quarter alone. The Warriors scored 28, which is pretty meh. Man, it's okay. Pacers scored 47. They were up 20 at halftime, and that quarter was just unbelievable. They couldn't miss. The Warriors couldn't, quite frankly, stop anything. And Tyrese Haliburton said it best, right? The way they want to play, they want to get stops and run in transition. Right? I've talked about that a lot this year because this team needed to be better on defense to get in transition more. They had it in that quarter where they were defending well enough to get out and run, and they were basically scoring every single time they would get out and run. And Haliburton, to his own credit, 17 points, 4 assists in that quarter by itself. Mathurin had 7, Brissett had 5, a bunch of other starters had 6. Like, they were awesome in that frame. And outside of Steph scoring 12, the Warriors were just kind of right? So credit to the Pacers. Awesome second quarter. And so while Steph had a bajillion points at halftime, I think he had 27 when the teams went to the locker room at the break, right? Usually when he scores 27 and is going nuclear like that, he was 9 for 13 at halftime. It's hard to be ahead of the Warriors. The Pacers were up 20 points at halftime after a Steph game like that. Mega impressive first half, insanely good second quarter, maybe the best quarter for the Pacers the whole season. Definitely their best offensive quarter all season long. And They're up 20. It felt like they had this game in the palm of their hand because it weren't like they hit a bunch of threes, but they were all wide open. It didn't feel like they were playing in a way that was, the other team missing open shots or them getting unusually hot with one guy or some unit riding hot that doesn't normally do it. Like, it felt like it was the way the Pacers normally want to play, and it was going well. So I thought they were going to do pretty well in the third quarter. They have a 20-point lead, and then Steph Curry shows up. The Steph show shows up, and that 20-point lead becomes moot very quickly in the third quarter of this game. Steph had 11. Jordan Poole had 7. Jonathan Kuminga had 7. They were scoring at will in the early parts of the third. 33 points for the Warriors in that frame. And Mathurin saved the day. He had 11 points. We'll get to him and his cape wearing in a second. But the Warriors cut it from 20 all the way down to 3. Slowly but surely over the course of this quarter, they were rolling. They looked fantastic in that third quarter. I think their run was like 19-4 or something to that end. They looked really special for much of that quarter. And then Rick Carlisle says, you know what? We need our rookie. We need Bennedict Mathurin in there for the juice. We need him to put on the cape. It was 70. I believe it was 73-80 about when Mathurin checked in. It was 78-73 when Mathurin checked in. Then it was 80-77 about a minute later, right? So the Pacers are up by 3. Mathurin's in. He hasn't done anything since he checked in yet. And then he took over, and he literally saved the Pacers. He saved the game at this point at 80-77. He hit a layup on the next possession for the Pacers. Then he gets fouled and gets to the free throw line. Then he hits another 3, and then he hits another 3, right? So in a quick span of layup plus 1 and a 3 and a 3, he scores 9 points in a minute and 4 seconds to take the Pacers lead from basically nothing up to 9, right? They needed that stretch, and then a couple more buckets later, they're up 13 in 3.5 minutes after Mathurin checks into the game. He saved them from themselves. They were giving away their whole lead. They couldn't do anything, and Bennedict Mathurin absolutely saved them. He was really excellent in that quarter. They're up 13, and then perhaps the biggest moment of the game for one moment, Steph Curry with 38 points at this moment through 3 quarters. Jalen Smith is driving to the basket. Steph Curry rotates in to try to help, and there was a collision, and Jalen Smith actually jumped away from Curry, like towards the basket, but they clipped shoulders, and Steph immediately reaches for it. His shoulder was in a lot of pain. He was questionable with a knee injury before the game. He was done for the night. He had 38, 7, and 7 at that point and was masterful in the third quarter, guiding the Warriors' comeback. He was done, right? That really hurt the Warriors' offense. They still scored well the rest of the game. The injury was not a game, like, obviously it's a game changer because it's Steph, but wasn't like the reason the Warriors lost, but it certainly made it harder for them to generate their points. Huge moment, right? So the Pacers don't have to deal with him in the fourth, and they still didn't close the third particularly well, so they had to battle still to get the win. And another big moment early in the fourth, about 3.5 minutes in, Bennedict Mathurin hits a big-time corner 3. He was just on fire in the second half, and the Draymond Green was called for the foul on the shot, and he did not like it. He did not like the foul, so he complains to the officials. He gets a tech at the 8:24 mark of the fourth quarter. The Warriors at this point are down 11 points. So then Hield hits the tech free throw. Mathurin hits a couple of his foul shots at the line. Hits his only foul shot at the line, and then the Warriors on the very other end, there's another foul where they're now at the line, and Draymond immediately starts bickering again. He's tossed 14 seconds later. So 8:10 to go in the game. Warriors down by 12. Draymond is done, and the Pacers now, the Warriors without their 2 best guys. Jordan Poole had 5 fouls, so he was 1 away from them being down their 3 best guys. They didn't even play that well in the fourth, and they still just coasted, right? They tied the quarter up at 32 apiece. That's all they needed. Pacers coast through to that win, and they took the air out of the ball, right? They did all the stuff you should do when the other team is down their best player. It was kind of frustrating to watch because they're normally such a fast-paced team to see them play so differently, but like they would throw it in for the last 6 minutes of the game, and they would dog walk it up where they don't touch it, so the clock's running, but the shot clock doesn't start, so their possessions are longer, right? And that's a smart strategy. Like, they needed it. They were only up 3 or 4 late. Like, I think the Warriors had almost had a possession with a chance to tie, so they needed every second they could get. It was smart stuff. It just was totally different from the basketball they normally have, and they let the clock be their teammate, and they got it done. Haliburton, awesome Tyrese Haliburton game. And he needed this. He had his worst game of the season, maybe of his entire career on Monday. We'll talk about that in the second segment, but he finishes with 29 points and 6 assists. He was 9 for 17 from the field. Big-time Bennedict Mathurin game. The hero, 24 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and not a typo, plus 34. The Pacers dominated Mathurin's minutes, and he played 36 minutes, by the way. Let's contextualize this. Oh, it's hard to contextualize this. Let's just do some math. The Pacers won by 6, and Mathurin played 36-21 and was a plus 34. So that means they were minus 28 in 11 some odd change minutes with Mathurin on the bench. Like, he was so crucial for this team today. They got smoked in Buddy Hield's minutes despite Hield playing good offense, right? He had 17 and 5, but his defense was not up to snuff. He was lined up across, not like literally defending Curry, although he was at times. He was always in the game at the same time as Curry, which really hurt his plus minus. But Mathurin was fantastic, and he also overlapped with Curry at times. Plus 34 is totally ridiculous. And then Myles Turner, 21 points. Himself, the game-saving block. He was also fantastic. Those three guys really stepped up, and the bench was good. Like, everybody filled the role, like I said. 9 assists for TJ McConnell, for example, 11 points for O'Shea Brissett. Everybody did well, and credit to the coaching staff for lots of things, obviously. But, with Turner late in the game, the Pacers are up by 3, and Myles Turner drives to the basket. Foul called on Moses Moody, and it was a charge call. A foul ultimately got called on Moses Moody, but it was originally called a charge. The Pacers challenge. It would have been Turner's 6th foul. He would have been out of the game with the Pacers only up by 3 with under a minute to go. Instead, it's reversed. It's a defensive foul. Turner hits a free throw. He gets the game-sealing block on the other end. Big challenge win. Big play by Turner. Impressive stuff from the Pacers, really wire to wire, and really inspiring win, right? They needed something like that after getting smoked in a shootout on Saturday and then smoked in a physical game on Monday. They get the win. They get it done over the champs. They're back to 7th in the East. The team right ahead of them. The next they play on Sunday, so in a good position to move wherever they would like to go with their wins coming up this week. They never get too low. The Pacers team never gets too low. They never get too down on themselves. They always find a way to bounce back, and that's what I want to talk about in this second segment. These Pacers team and their ability to fight through whatever issues they have. It's something they've done all season, and I always talk about that, but this game really exemplified it. I asked guys about it, and 2 players really put it all together. But before we talk about that, let me talk to you guys about 2 great groups of people. First up, the good folks at ExpressVPN. We all know how ExpressVPN protects your privacy and security online, right? But there's something you might not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. Maybe you've run out of stuff to watch on Netflix. This will change your world. ExpressVPN allows you to binge watch, for example, The Office UK version on Netflix. It's so simple to do. Sign in to Netflix, fire up ExpressVPN, change your location to the UK, refresh, bam, there it is. You can control where you want sites to think you're located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries. So just imagine all the Netflix libraries you can go through. Korean dramas with South Korean Netflix, for example. And not just Netflix, Hulu, iPlayer, YouTube, you name it, they've got it. There's hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason ExpressVPN is the best because it's super fast. There's no buffering or lag. You can stream it HD, no problem. And it also works on all your devices, phones, media consoles, whatever. So if you want to get access to hundreds of new shows, go to expressvpn.com/lockedon right now, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/lockedon. expressvpn.com/lockedon to learn more. And also, let me read you a message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many, and as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home, no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe, plan ahead, get it right. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, why not check out Locked On Warriors? Cyrus Satas. Talk about Steph's injury, the Warriors side of that game, where the Warriors are headed. They're under 500 again. They cannot win a road game to save their life. But this is the Pacers show, and the Pacers are resilient once again. And I think this game was a very good summation of this Pacers season for a million reasons. And the number one is that their bounce back ability. I talk about this a lot, right? Like after they lost to the Nets and again after the Heat, I'm curious to see how the Pacers will play in their next game because they've been very good at bouncing back this season, responding to losses, responding to hard days, responding to injuries, responding to lineup changes, whatever it is. The Pacers have responded. Guys in new roles, they do well. New situations have been no problem. A string of losses, they've found a way to overcome it. And that is a rare quality for a young, kind of new, put-together team. And that made this game kind of the perfect summation of the Pacers this year, right? I keep saying they find ways to bounce back, and this game had that not only in the result, but also in the way 2 guys specifically played. So first, let's just walk through some examples of this, right? Like The Pacers start 1-4. They get blown out by Detroit before a magical fourth quarter, and then they still lose, or excuse me, Washington. And the same thing happens against the Spurs, and then they lose to Philly, and then they lose to the Sixers, or excuse me, the Bulls, right? They're 1-4 to start the year. So they had a lot of catching up to do. And then they have a beautiful national TV game against the Nets. They set a franchise record on ESPN in Brooklyn the next night. Like, they look great. They're back up to 3-4. They slowly get back to 500 after, the Pelicans win, and they're right back in the thick of it. They go on a big run. They're over 500, and then they have the tough road trip, right? They get the miraculous win over the Lakers, and they lose 3 in a row, right? They look dead in the water. Brilliant game to steady their season, against the Warriors, right? Then they lose the final game of that trip. They come back home. Boom, immediately win against the Wizards, right? Get home from it, steady it out. That's just stuff that they've done kind of all season when they've needed to overcome a tricky situation. They find a way to get it done. And tonight they had the chance to be under 500 for the first time since November 11th, right? After surviving those stretches earlier, this could have been a bad one, but they didn't. They got through the slump, right? That Saturday, a game with 260 total points, followed by Monday, a game with 160 total points. Shout out to Scott Agnes for pointing out the 100-point difference, but they've been slumping, right? They couldn't win any type of game. They need a win. Here it is, right? A full team effort against Golden State. They looked really good for much of the game, basically outside of the early third quarter stretch. They looked like the better team for the whole game. And so for this Pacers team, this is what I mean. They always find a way to bounce back from their slumps. And recently, they've had some trouble stringing together wins, right? They actually haven't won 2 in a row since they beat the Magic twice in a row in mid-November, but they keep getting timely wins in a way that's kept them around, kept them positive, and makes me think that they can pretty soon get their 2 wins in a row. I don't know what opponents it will be against, but they keep finding ways to stick around. And I asked Carlisle about it after the game. He said they're resilient, right? This is a resilient basketball team, and that's always good to have, right? That's always a good quality to have. And they've been resilient all year. They've played from behind a lot and found a way to win. And all of this is very emblematic of what this Pacers team is. And after I asked Carlisle about the resilience, I wanted to ask him about the big second quarter. Embarrassed myself, hand up, first time of the season. I forgot my question, right? He was talking about the team's resilience and players' resilience and things like that. And I just phased out. I wanted to ask him about their big second quarter, and I just forgot my question. And I wanted to embarrass myself again on this show. It was so bad. But either way, I bounced back talking to Haliburton and Mathurin, just like this team always does. And in this game, those two guys, the two guys who took the podium after the game, Bennedict Mathurin and Tyrese Haliburton, they bounced back in a way that's really emblematic of this Pacers team and their seasons in general, right? It doesn't, we all know about it. I did a whole segment on it Monday. For Haliburton, 1 point, right? 1 point. 6 assists, 5 assists, I can't remember. Low for him. 1 point, specifically the second lowest of his career. To the point that Buddy Hield, his teammate even back in Sacramento, said, yeah, that was the worst game of his career, right? Like, and he didn't say it in a way that was negative. He actually said it in a way that was, I tried to boost him up. We all have these games. Myles Turner said the same thing after this Warriors game. But either way, worst game of his career. He comes out tonight like it never happened, right? 29 points, hits half of his threes, takes 17 shots. That's a team high. Gets to the line 7 times. That's something he's been talking about needing to be better at, right? His only free throw attempt against Miami was that tech free throw. He said, I've got to get to the line more. There it is, 7 in this game, right? He bounced back, and he knew he needed to, and that is something he's done really well, right? He put his money where his mouth is. He said the last 2 days sucked for him, right? He had to dwell on that 1-point game. He had to really think about all that stuff, and he acted like it. He acted like that game gnawed at him, and he bounced back. And I think that is impressive stuff from a young guy on a young team. And Bennedict Mathurin, sort of a similar situation, like kind of lesser known for him, but in the last 6 games leading up to this performance, he had not been playing very well. 13.5 points per game. That's fine. 35.8% from the field in that stretch in his last 6 outings. In this game, right, 24, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, plus 34, like I already said. Huge bounce back game. Crazy good. Mixed in the drives. The way he finished drives, whether that was like a mid-ranger or at the rim or drawing the foul, whatever, was good. It, obviously going 4 of 7 from deep will make you look good. And he had good spirit in this game, right? He just was really good. And this is who he is and who this team is. They're really capable of flushing bad stretches and bouncing back and finding a way to be a good team, right? Bennedict Mathurin stayed focused. That's something he talked about himself after the game, but he worked on shooting threes in rhythm with Rick Carlisle at practice on Tuesday. We could see them doing it. Carlisle called it out after the game. And Mathurin took that to heart and used it to bounce back, right? This is the hallmark of a good team, and the Pacers clearly look like one of those teams right now, right? They're doing a very good job of constantly flushing their bad games and getting better, and for now, they continue to do it. As of December 15th, still over 500 and still a team that is tough to get too low to not beat the next day. And speaking of December 15th, I have to sigh, but I want to do it now. It's the first day of unofficial trade season. Let's get this out of the way. December 15th is the day that guys who signed contracts with a new team in the off season under certain parameters can be traded. So the unofficial start of trade season has many possibilities legally open up around the league. Let's talk about the Pacers trade season coming up, with the trade deadline being in early February. What could the Pacers do? I don't know. But I want to talk about some big picture stuff to keep an eye on over the next couple months from the Pacers' perspective. Before we do that, though, let me really quickly talk to you guys about Built Bar. You got to try Built Bar's new reimagined flavors: cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper. You have got to try them. With white chocolate peppermint granola, that's Built's new take on the granola bar, so they have a more filling one out there as well. But I've talked a lot about these new flavors and these things. What is Built Bar? Well, they're the best tasting protein bars out there, quite literally, right? They're revolutionizing nutrition with 100% real chocolate, but 17 grams of protein, shockingly low sugar, and only 130 calories in their bars, right? So they're delicious. They taste like a candy bar. They're healthy, good for you. They come in so many amazing flavors. The peanut butter brownie, oh, it's delightful. The cookie dough ones are all really good. I'm not kidding. There'll be a time before you tried Built Bar, but you try the new flavors, there will no longer be a time where you don't have them anymore. You've got to try them. Get 15% of your order right now by using the code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. Again, that code is LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Locked On Sports Today. Go behind the scenes from the biggest stories in sports from your local experts here at the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts or on YouTube and the Odyssey app. It's an unofficial trade season day one. It's December 15th. If you sign a contract with a new team in the offseason under certain parameters, there's more that goes into it than just that, but you can be traded now, right? So a lot of options are now open to teams, to players, whatever the situation may be, for trades to happen. And that's why many people call this the unofficial start of trade season. Stuff heats up kind of before this, but this is when it starts. And this is when I'm going to talk about it for the first time and then not again for a while, because talking about rumors is kind of boring unless they're really important or concrete or meaningful to the team. And I'm not going to talk about any specific names or players today. Actually, I will be talking about Myles Turner, but not anyone on a different team. And so I want to prep you for the Pacers trade deadline, right? There's going to be a lot of, I think their name's going to be in a lot of stuff, right? That comes out, whether that's from actual negotiations, whether that's from leaks, from teams trying to get leverage, whether that's real stuff from whoever. I think they're going to be named in a lot of stuff. And that's because of a lot of things. But the main one is, it's because they, in theory, could go two directions. I don't think they should consider one of the directions, but they have the option of saying, hey, look, we're over 500. We're a good team. Like, we could keep this together, maybe make a few tiny upgrades and go for it. Make the playoffs, be a threat in the postseason. And they could also be the team that they said they would be before the season, this new long-term approach team where, they skew younger and they think about their future in longer gaps of years instead of just 1 to 2, and maybe not be a seller, although I would constitute much of what I would consider that strategy to be as being a seller. But, look for ways to get upgrades or long-term assets for your veterans, expiring contracts, things like that. Because both options are plausible, the Pacers should be named in a lot of stuff. And also because they have cap space, right? They don't have to match salaries in trades. They can do lopsided stuff where they take in way more salary than they send out. That makes fake trades, rumored stuff, whatever you want to call it, stuff that's spit off the wall by some other front office guy, all way more plausible. Lots of permutations exist for the Pacers that don't exist for other teams. All that put together means expect a lot of stuff that is less substantive than in a normal year. And also, always be careful with reports and their source. I'm not going to call out anybody who's plugged in anywhere. I just always check who you're reading from. Just because you read a fake trade on the internet doesn't mean it's something sourced or something the Pacers are actually considering doing. It drives me crazy to have to respond to all that stuff. Anyway, here are my key things to consider heading into the trade deadline. One, the best player on an expiring contract on the Pacers is obviously Myles Turner, right? And that means he's going to be in a lot of chatter. He's the only name I'm going to say in this segment, but he will be in a lot of stuff regardless of his great season and his fit with the Pacers, right? I've talked about the merits of the Pacers wanting to pursue an extension with him if he wanted to stay. Like, he's earned that level of discussion where, he what would his future look like with the team, right? Does it make sense for them to keep him because he's been so good? Does an extension make sense? All that stuff because he's been so good, but because of, right, he's in the last year of his deal. The Pacers' direction is kind of TBD. I expect to see his name a lot going both directions, and he's definitely the most key player on the team on an expiring deal, right? Goga is, O'Shea Brissett is, James Johnson is, but obviously Myles Turner in a tier of his own in that way. So expect to see his name a lot and him to be a constant source of discussion because him staying or going will be the storyline for the Pacers in the stretch. Again, I'm not here to make fake trades or to say what the Pacers should or shouldn't do, but just expect to hear his name a lot. But here's my biggest thing you need to know and think about with the Pacers approaching this trade deadline. Why should they rush, right? If you think there is very little reason for the Pacers to be one of the first teams to make a trade or a big trade in the trade season, unless they get just blown away by a mega offer. And I think every team would think, yeah, we should be patient unless we get a mega offer. But the Pacers specifically, because they have flexibility, they have the ability to go both ways, and the cap space component that them and the Spurs, the only teams that can do that, right? If they get rid of that space in a trade on December 20th or something, which I don't think that they will, just for example, now they can't use that space in a trade for the next month and a half. They have blown away a bunch of options. Who's to say that the trade that they took won't be there at that time, right? Because they have all this flexibility, because they can be, a safe haven for other teams looking to dump salary, because they could be lopsided trades, because they have a lot of, guys who are interesting to other franchises to get. They seem like a team that should be waiting. One of the last teams to do stuff because maybe not last, but, closer to the deadline to maximize the timing of that flexibility. It becomes not an advantage anymore once it's gone, but they can keep it and use it as an advantage the entire time. And that's why I think, as much as you might see the name of the team name of the Pacers and a lot of this stuff, I think that they should and probably will be one of the later teams involved in the processes of stuff, just to keep their flexibility open and make sure they're using all their resources to the best of their ability, thus clamoring for them to do something or reading something about them in late December, early January, whatever, and expecting that to happen soon seems like a fool's errand, right? Think longer term in terms of, the month and a half coming up. I think that's really important to note with this team, right? They very rarely should jump all over stuff anyway. I don't think any team should be making trades in early December, hardly, but the Pacers specifically should be a closer to the deadline team. Keep the cap space stuff in mind, right? The Pacers don't have to send back even salary in a deal. So you might see some reported trades that make just no sense for the Pacers because they don't have to actually match salary. If you see a trade where it looks like they're sending back salary for a player that doesn't make sense with the assets involved, they just take the player out, right? Just keep in mind that it doesn't require as much to build a successful trade for the Pacers as it does for other teams, and that can make, fake proposals look extremely silly. But don't read fake proposals. Enjoy basketball games instead. And the fourth and final point I would like to throw out to prep you for the Pacers' upcoming trade deadline. The aggregation rule is interesting and important to the Pacers, and we just crossed a notable date, right? And that is December 9th, and that's important because it's 2 months before the trade deadline this year. And if you trade for a player and you acquire him using not cap space, you cannot retrade that player until after 2 months. So, there was some chatter. I forget who reported it, but anyway, that the Knicks were trying to do stuff earlier this month because they could do it before that aggregation deadline and then in theory flip somebody if they wanted to, right? With that sort of thing, that date is passed. But the Pacers are a team that can flip players because if you acquire a player in a trade with cap space, you can reaggregate them in another deal. It's more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. And so the reaggregation date being passed means I think some of this stuff will die down for a little bit, but for the Pacers, that doesn't matter as much, right? They can kind of trudge on as they were. And if they get two pieces in a trade for one guy, for example, they can look to flip one of those two pieces right away. And that's always, a valuable thing to have. That's another benefit of the flexibility that they have, going back to point number 2, and another reason why waiting might make a lot of sense for them in this process. 3-team trades, for example, looking like something that could make a lot of sense for the Pacers. But that's it for the trade stuff. Let's table this till January 15th, when basically every player in the league can be traded. Not quite all of them, but most of them can, starting on that day. And then there's only 25 days, 3 weeks till the trade deadline. That's a better time to really dive into this stuff. But I wanted to give a high-level overview of what I think are the key things to know as the Pacers head into trade season. Tomorrow, talking Cavs with Chris Manning of Locked On Cavs. Pacers legends Karis LeVert, Ricky Rubio lining up for Cleveland. They look really good this year. Pacers got them Friday night. We'll, of course, preview all that action, talk team building as we usually do with these other hosts. And then, of course, they play the Knicks Sunday. We'll be breaking down the Cavs and Knicks games next Monday of next week. So hope you guys enjoyed today's show and the upcoming ones. Lots of fun stuff coming about this team that continues to find ways to get wins. We'll break it all down as it happens here on Locked On Pacers. Thank you guys a ton for listening. Have a great rest of your day. We will see you very soon.